Picture yourself in a bustling Igbo village named Umuofia, located in what is now southeastern Nigeria, sometime in the late 19th century, before the full force of British colonial rule and Christian missionary influence has swept through. There's a vibrant tapestry of daily life here. Open-air markets packed with yams and palm oil, communal gatherings punctuated by ritual drumbeats, and kinship ties that bind people together in a tight web of shared religion, customs, and traditions. In this world, a man's worth is measured by his titles, his achievements in wrestling, his prowess in warfare, and his ability to provide for his family and clan. Society is guided by a pantheon of gods and oracles, ancestral spirits, and strict social norms that foster both unity and conflict. Within this dynamic environment emerges our protagonist, Okonkwo, a man of intense drive and larger-than-life ambition. At the story's opening, he has already become a famed wrestler, a respected warrior, and a prosperous farmer. Yet underlying his outward strength is a deep-seated fear, an all-consuming terror of becoming anything like his father, Anoka, who was scorned for his laziness, constant debt, and lack of ambition. Because of his father's failures, Okonkwo vows to forge a name and legacy defined by hard work, discipline, and most importantly, a strict adherence to what he believes to be true manliness. This is the lens through which he sees his entire life and interacts with everyone around him. Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart is, at its core, the story of one man's journey to secure his reputation and preserve his vision of tradition at a time of cultural upheaval. Yet it's also a portrait of an entire community, one that is rich, multifaceted, and soon to be rocked by the forces of colonialism and religious change. From the very first pages, you'll notice a quiet tension simmering beneath the ordinary rhythms of village life. Rumors circulate about the white man's arrival, about new forms of worship in neighboring lands, about alliances that have begun to crumble. For now, the people of Umuofia continue their time-honored practices, but something monumental is on the horizon. To truly understand Okonkwo, you have to peer into the shadow cast by his father, Anoka. Anoka was a gentle man who loved music and conversation, but could never seem to hold on to his wealth, or even feed his family adequately. This left Okonkwo with a burning resentment for anything resembling laziness or softness. He resolved early in life to be the exact opposite: hardworking, controlling, and quick to anger if he sensed any hint of weakness. As a teenager, Okonkwo gained fame by defeating a legendary wrestler named Amelins the Cat, a feat that vaulted him to stardom and respect within the clan. This gave him confidence and set him on the path to success. By the time we meet him, Okonkwo is in his 30s and has 3 wives and multiple children. He's amassed numerous yam barns, symbolic of prosperity, and has earned 2 prestigious titles in the village, marking him as a man of formidable status. He cuts a striking figure, tall, muscular, with a severe expression, prone to outbursts of rage. His family members, wives and children alike, tread carefully around him, knowing that even minor infractions can unleash his wrath. Yet Okonkwo's success isn't just about personal pride. In the Igbo worldview, ensuring familial and communal stability is paramount. He believes he is acting correctly by enforcing discipline, by pushing his sons to be fearless and hardworking, and by leading his household with an iron fist. One early episode highlights the tensions in his household, when Okonkwo perceives his youngest wife, Ojugo, to be neglecting her duties by leaving her hut to visit a friend. He lashes out during the sacred week of peace, a time when violence is strictly forbidden. This transgression unsettles the entire community. It's not just a private altercation. Okonkwo must appease the gods with sacrifices, and the elders scold him, worried that his quick temper disrespects tradition. While Okonkwo obeys the prescribed penance, he privately resents the interruption to his routine, stubbornly holding on to the notion that showing leniency would be an unforgivable sign of weakness. Shortly thereafter, a twist of fate brings a boy named Ikamafuna into Okonkwo's life. Ikamafuna is offered to Yumwofia by a neighboring village as part of a settlement to avoid warfare. It is decided he will live with Okonkwo until the oracle instructs otherwise. Though he hails from outside Yumwofia, Ikamafuna becomes an integral part of Okonkwo's family. He quickly bonds with Okonkwo's oldest son, Nwoi, who is drawn to Ikamafuna's warmth, storytelling gifts, and gentle leadership. Nwoi admires Ikamafuna as an older brother figure, and in many ways, Ikamafuna fills a gap that Okonkwo himself struggles to address, an emotional connection and nurturing style of guidance. Despite himself, Okonkwo grows fond of Ikamafuna, yet he's careful not to show it, maintaining a stoic veneer lest he betray any sign of paternal tenderness. Over 3 years, Ikamafuna thrives in the household, becoming part of the clan's daily rhythms, learning their customs, and breathing new life into Nwoi, who is often at odds with his father's unyielding harshness. Under Ikamafuna's influence, Nwoi begins to adopt more traditionally masculine behaviors, which pleases Okonkwo, if only grudgingly. This short-lived domestic stability hints at a path not taken, a future in which Okonkwo might soften, where a loving father-son relationship could flourish. But destiny and the complex codes of the oracle steer things toward tragedy. The quiet harmony surrounding Ikamafuna takes a brutal turn when the oracle of the hills and the caves, the local spiritual authority, decrees that the boy must be killed. The exact reasoning is steeped in Igbo mysticism, implying that Ikamafuna's life is a necessary sacrifice to maintain cosmic order. The clan's elders relay this decision to Okonkwo, cautioning him not to take part in the actual deed because Ikamafuna calls him father. Okonkwo, however, fears appearing weak above all else. Spurred by a misguided sense of duty and his obsessive quest to show manliness, he not only joins the killing party, but delivers the final blow as Ikamafuna, disoriented and betrayed, cries out for help. This moment is one of the most chilling and pivotal scenes in the novel. It crackles with tension as Ikamafuna senses that something is off, yet trusts Okonkwo until the last second. When Okonkwo's machete falls, it severs not just Ikamafuna's life, but also any semblance of emotional wholeness in Okonkwo's household. In the aftermath, Nwoi is traumatized, wrestling with grief and confusion about a culture and a father that would commit such a brutal act. Okonkwo, for his part, experiences a rare surge of regret and existential dread. For days, he cannot eat or sleep comfortably, and though he tries to bury his sorrow under the veneer of manly stoicism, the event triggers a subtle unraveling of his emotional and spiritual moorings. In the weeks following Ikamafuna's death, a heavy pall hangs over Okonkwo's compound. Nwoi becomes quieter, more withdrawn, and internally begins to question the moral framework of the clan's traditions. This isn't the first time he's been disturbed by the ways of his people. He's also unsettled by customs like the abandonment of newborn twins in the forest, but Ikamafuna's murder shatters his fragile acceptance of these norms. Okonkwo notices Nwoi's distancing, yet any attempt to address it is muddied by his own shame, fury, and inability to express vulnerability. Instead, he doubles down on his harshness. Meanwhile, daily life in Yumwofia continues, but subtle changes are evident. Social ceremonies, harvest festivals, and communal rituals proceed as usual, though rumblings about the white man and strange new gods grow louder. Some villagers dismiss these rumors as exaggerations. Others sense a gathering storm. Okonkwo tries to refocus on his own ambition, keen to climb further up the social ladder by taking additional titles and expanding his influence. Yet a foreboding sense of disquiet clings to him. Unbeknownst to him at the time, the death of Ikamafuna marks the beginning of a profound transformation in his own life trajectory and in the fate of the entire clan. A year or so after Ikamafuna's death, a funeral is held for an elder in Yumwofia. Funerals here are raucous affairs, complete with drumming, dancing, and the firing of guns into the air. In the midst of this celebration-turned mourning, Okonkwo's gun accidentally goes off, killing Izuda's 16-year-old son. In Igbo law, taking a life under these circumstances is labeled a female crime, an unintentional offense that still demands consequences. Because blood has been spilled and Okonkwo's hand was involved, he must be exiled from Yumwofia for 7 years. The blow is devastating. This man who prided himself on his impeccable rise to power and status must abruptly leave behind his compound, his farmland, and the community where he's built his reputation. He retreats to Mbanta, his mother's natal village, taking his immediate family with him. Yet in Yumwofia, all that he has built, houses, barns, livestock, are burned according to tradition, both to purge the land of the taint of bloodshed and as a symbolic reset. For Okonkwo, who measures success by material wealth and social prestige, it's a punishing downfall. He's forced to start anew in a place where he has fewer personal ties and less influence. And so begins another chapter in which Okonkwo must grapple with personal humiliation and a creeping sense that his destiny is slipping away. In Banta, Okonkwo's maternal uncle, Uchendu, receives him warmly, providing him with plots of land to cultivate yams. Nevertheless, Okonkwo is tormented by his fall from grace. Instead of viewing exile as a temporary setback, he treats it as a near-complete ruin of all he's achieved. In Igbo society, there is a certain comfort in returning to one's maternal homeland in times of crisis. It's seen as a place of refuge, where a person can be nurtured back to strength. But Okonkwo's rigid view of masculinity prevents him from fully accepting this maternal sanctuary. He resents his own dependence and bristles at any hint of pity. Uchendu, who is wiser and more measured, repeatedly counsels Okonkwo to moderate his destructive pride. He reminds his nephew of the importance of humility and adaptability, essential values in Igbo culture that allow the community to endure hardships. Okonkwo listens but remains fixated on his thwarted ambitions in Yumwofia. He invests himself in sowing new yam fields, but a deep well of bitterness lingers. It is during this time of exile that the seeds of wider change reach Mbanta and, by extension, Okonkwo's family. Missionaries arrive, preaching a new religion centered on one God and a Savior named Jesus Christ, a belief system that at first seems incomprehensible to the locals. Life in Mbanta takes a seismic turn when a small band of Christian missionaries, led by a gentle but determined man named Mr. Brown, sets up camp in the village. Curious onlookers gather to listen to their sermons, initially more out of amusement than genuine interest. The missionaries speak of the Trinity, heaven, and a God who is distinctly different from the pantheon of Igbo deities. They condemn the practice of abandoning twins in the forest, a practice the Igbo see as necessary to rid the clan of an abomination. Some villagers scoff at these alien ideas, predicting that the newcomers will anger the earth goddess and meet a swift, divine punishment. But when no such punishment befalls them, curiosity morphs into cautious respect, and a handful of villagers begin to attend the Christian services. Among the early converts is Okonkwo's son Nwoi, still wrestling with the guilt and horror of Ikemefuni's death, and troubled by aspects of Igbo religion he cannot reconcile. Nwoi finds the Christian's message of brotherly love and the redemption of suffering deeply comforting. This is a pivotal moment in the novel. Nwoi's growing attachment to Christianity represents a direct challenge to Okonkwo's worldview. When Okonkwo learns of Nwoi's involvement, he explodes in rage, threatening violence and disowning him. Nwoi ultimately flees, finding refuge with the missionaries. The father-son bond fractures irrevocably, a wound that will fester and eventually contribute to Okonkwo's unraveling. Despite Okonkwo's fury, the Christian mission in Banta continues to expand. Though the villagers still largely uphold their traditional practices, a subtle shift has begun. The newcomers establish a church and even build a modest school and hospital. Bit by bit, the Christian community weaves itself into the fabric of daily life, offering new forms of social organization and suggesting that the Igbo deities lack power. This infiltration of a foreign religion and culture sets the stage for the larger confrontation looming on the horizon. After 7 years of exile, Okonkwo finally returns to Umuofia with plans to reassert his prominence. He envisions rebuilding his compound on a grander scale, taking more titles, and arranging advantageous marriages for his daughters to secure alliances. However, upon arriving, he discovers a village profoundly changed by the Christian presence. The once small church has grown, attracting not just outcasts and the disaffected, but also respected men seeking personal advantage or genuinely interested in the new faith. The missionaries are now led by a harsher figure named Reverend James Smith, who replaces the more accommodating Mr. Brown. Under Mr. Brown's earlier leadership, there was at least a semblance of negotiation between the new and old orders. But Reverend Smith preaches in stark absolutes, condemning Igbo gods as mere idols. Tensions flare. Okonkwo, who expected a triumphant homecoming, is greeted instead by the unsettling realization that his beloved Umuofia no longer fully resembles the place he left. Many of the clan's rules and taboos are openly challenged by converts who feel protected by the colonial administration that follows in the missionaries' wake. Okonkwo is furious that the clan has, in his eyes, grown soft, unwilling to expel or punish these foreigners who disrespect tradition. Okonkwo's frustration is further compounded when he sees how the colonial government, represented by court messengers and a district commissioner, has imposed new forms of law and order. Certain Igbo practices are now outlawed, and those who oppose the new regime risk fines or imprisonment. Okonkwo's old friend, Obiarika, shares in his disappointment, but warns that the white man's power is not just about religion. It's backed by guns, commerce, and a system of governance that exploits divisions within the clan. Okonkwo, impatient and seething with rage, begins pressing for direct action, violence if necessary, to restore Umuofia's independence and dignity. The more fervent Christian converts, emboldened by their new faith and the support of colonial authorities, grow bolder in challenging Igbo customs. One convert, Enoch, dramatically tears the mask off an Igwugwu during a sacred ceremony, an act tantamount to blasphemy. The Igwugwu are ancestral spirits represented by masked men chosen by the clan. To unmask an Igwugwu is to expose the mortal beneath the spirit, effectively killing the deity. The entire village is stunned, for this is an abomination that strikes at the spiritual heart of Igbo life. In retaliation, the Igwugwu and other outraged members of the clan burned the local Christian church to the ground. This is a critical moment where tensions between the old religion and the new faith flare openly. Okonkwo is thrilled by this act of retribution, interpreting it as a sign that the clan is finally demonstrating the unity and boldness he's been craving. But the Christian converts lodge a complaint with the Colonial District Commissioner, who immediately summons the village leaders, Okonkwo among them, to his headquarters under the guise of talking things over. There, the Igbo leaders are ambushed, handcuffed, and insulted. The district commissioner jails them and demands a heavy fine to secure their release. In prison, the men endure humiliation. Their heads are shaved, and they're mocked by court messengers. Upon hearing of this betrayal, the people of Umuofia gather the ransom money. Okonkwo simmers with a boiling fury that intensifies into hatred, not just for the white men, but for anyone who has allowed this to happen. After paying the fine, Okonkwo and the other leaders return to Umuofia, seething with anger and shame. A village meeting is called at the marketplace, the historic site for communal decision-making. Okonkwo attends with a heightened sense of desperation. He's prepared to fight, kill, or die to restore what he sees as the clan's lost glory. As he stands before his people, there's a glimmer of hope that the gathered elders might agree to wage a final war against the invaders. Just then, court messengers arrive with orders to disband the meeting. With adrenaline coursing through him, Okonkwo doesn't hesitate. He decapitates the lead messenger with his machete, his entire being ablaze with a sense of righteous fury. But to his horror, no one from Umuofia joins in. The other messengers escape, and the villagers stand there, shocked and immobilized. In that frozen silence, Okonkwo realizes that the clan he has fought so hard to protect, or to dominate, has changed irrevocably. They will not follow him down the path of open rebellion. This revelation is the final blow to Okonkwo's spirit. He walks away from the crowd and disappears. When the district commissioner arrives later with armed men to apprehend him, they find that Okonkwo has taken his own life. He hangs himself on a tree behind his compound, an act considered a grave offense against the earth in Igbo belief. Okonkwo, the man who strove for perfection and feared failure above all else, dies by his own hand, an outcast from both the new order and the old tradition. The novel's central tension revolves around the collision of Igbo traditions with the forces of Western colonialism and Christian evangelism. Achebe meticulously details rituals, customs, and social hierarchies to portray a deeply rooted cultural system that is both structured and vulnerable. Okonkwo's tragic downfall illustrates how even the strongest individual cannot single-handedly stop the march of change when it's fueled by external powers and internal divisions. Okonkwo is haunted by the specter of his father's perceived weakness. His entire life becomes a drive to embody a hyper-masculine ideal, suppressing any emotional softness. The murder of Ikamafuna is the ultimate expression of this destructive mindset, as Okonkwo chooses appearing strong over natural paternal love. This rigidity eventually alienates him from his community and his own children, leaving him isolated when crisis hits. While Okonkwo fixates on personal achievement, Igbo society values communal harmony and familial connections. Characters like Uchendu underscore the importance of empathy and collective well-being. Okonkwo's failures are starkly framed against the clan's readiness to adapt or at least negotiate with new realities. His exile showcases how communal laws, both spiritual and judicial, transcend any individual status. Questions arise about whether Okonkwo's end is predestined by the gods or is the direct result of his personal choices. Igbo spiritual beliefs and the oracle's decrees appear to guide certain actions, yet Okonkwo's own impulsive decisions often compound his troubles. The tension between divine will and individual agency remains potent throughout the story. The arrival of missionaries and the colonial government exposes fractures within the clan. Some embrace new opportunities, others resist. Achebe is careful not to portray the Igbo as idyllic or the colonizers as purely evil. Instead, he shows how cultural upheaval arises from misunderstandings, power imbalances, and the willful imposition of foreign norms. The narrative becomes a larger reflection on how entire civilizations can fall apart under the weight of external conquest and internal discord. Okonkwo. His arc is defined by his rise to fame, his fear-driven actions, and ultimately, his tragic demise. From a local wrestling hero, he evolves into a figure of immense pride whose inability to adapt results in catastrophic outcomes for himself and those around him. Moi, Okonkwo's oldest son, initially seeks his father's approval, but grows disillusioned by violence and rigidity. His attraction to Christianity stems from a longing for compassion and a moral framework that condemns practices he finds abhorrent. Moi's conversion is a personal liberation, but also a familial betrayal in Okonkwo's eyes. Ikamafuna. Though only briefly in the story, Ikamafuna leaves a deep emotional impact. His death is a turning point for Okonkwo and Moi, symbolizing the dangerous extremes of a culture that can sanction violence in the name of tradition. Mr. Brown versus Reverend Smith. These two missionaries represent different faces of colonial Christianity. Mr. Brown attempts respectful dialogue with the Igbo, even if he remains paternalistic. Reverend Smith, in contrast, sees no compatibility between Christianity and local customs, escalating conflicts. Together, they show how different colonial attitudes can foster varying outcomes, for better or worse. Obiarika, often seen as the voice of reason and a counterpoint to Okonkwo's impulsive nature. Obiarika questions the morality of certain Igbo customs, like the killing of Ikamafuna, and also recognizes the unstoppable wave of colonial power. He laments the slow erosion of Igbo autonomy, but also criticizes rigid adherence to tradition. Marketplace is alive with barter and gossip, where women sell produce and men discuss clan affairs. Family compounds ringed by mud walls, with separate huts for each wife and her children, reflecting polygamous household structures. Ceremonial gatherings featuring drumming, dancing, wrestling contests, and the masked Igbo processions that connect the living with ancestral spirits. Agricultural cycles governed by the planting and harvesting of yams, which are both staple food and a symbol of prosperity. These settings echo with the sounds of talking drums, the aroma of cooking soups thickened with palm oil, and the tension-filled hush during spiritual ceremonies. They also underscore the tight connection between daily life and religious belief. When colonial institutions arrive, courthouses, missionary schools, new architectural styles, they introduce stark visual and ideological contrasts that highlight the novel's central conflicts. Things Fall Apart is deeply charged with emotion, grief, anger, hope, and betrayal. Achebe's use of straightforward yet evocative language helps the reader, or in this case, the viewer of your summary, connect with the characters' internal struggles. Okonkwo's wrath and despair become palpable, especially after Ikemafuna's death and during his humiliating imprisonment by the district commissioner. Nwoy's quiet agony radiates whenever he's forced to witness violence or endure his father's disdain. Even the clan's collective heartbreak at the final turn of events, when they discover Okonkwo's body, carries a sense of mourning for a lost way of life. This emotional heft arises not just from personal tragedies, but from the broader cultural catastrophe unfolding. The Igbo, once confident in their spiritual and judicial structures, are now confronted with a worldview that labels their gods as false, their customs as barbaric, and their governance as inferior. Yet, Achebe never reduces the Igbo to passive victims. They make decisions, some wise, some fatal, that shape their own destiny. This complexity fosters empathy and challenges readers to see the story as a universal reflection on change, identity, and the high cost of inflexibility. The climax comes with Okonkwo's swift killing of the court messenger, a desperate bid to resurrect old values through violence. The moment he realizes the clan is not with him seals his fate. Retreating alone, he makes a final, irrevocable act by taking his own life, a deed that in Igbo belief disgraces both the individual and the earth goddess. The next day, when the district commissioner and his men find Okonkwo's body, they ask the villagers to cut him down. But Obiorika scathingly demands that the district commissioner do it himself, explaining that suicide is a taboo that forbids other villagers from handling the corpse. In a strikingly ironic final note, the district commissioner muses on how he might include a small paragraph about Okonkwo's story in his forthcoming book about the pacification of the tribes. This clinical, dismissive perspective contrasts sharply with the rich, tragic narrative we've just experienced, underscoring how colonial accounts often trivialized or misunderstood the complexities of African societies. Thus, Achebe ends the novel on a somber reflection, prompting the reader to question who gets to tell history and whose voice prevails when cultures collide. Since its publication in 1958, Things Fall Apart has become a classic text that challenges simplistic Western narratives of Africa as a homogeneous, primitive continent in need of civilization. Achebe demonstrates that the Igbo, and by extension other African societies, had their own intricate systems of governance, religion, commerce, and philosophy before colonial intervention. The tragedy lies not only in Okonkwo's personal failings, but also in the broader societal unraveling triggered by external forces that exploit existing rifts within the culture. The novel resonates far beyond its setting. Readers worldwide connect with its themes of identity, tradition, conflict, and the destructive effects of pride. Achebe invites contemplation on what happens when rigid adherence to custom encounters equally rigid forces of change, how communities might adapt peacefully or violently, or fail to adapt at all. For many, the figure of Okonkwo remains a cautionary archetype, illustrating how fear and inflexibility can doom even the strongest among us. In summarizing the entire scope of Things Fall Apart, we've walked through Okonkwo's rise and fall, witnessed how a cohesive society can be torn apart by both internal tensions and external pressures, and seen the moral complexities Achebe weaves into every scene. For a YouTube audience that might be encountering this story for the first time, the essence of the novel can be felt as both intensely personal. Okonkwo's tragedy, Nwoy's awakening, Ikemefuna's death, and expansively cultural, reflecting the dismantling of an entire way of life. If there is a singular takeaway, it's this: Things Fall Apart is not merely the story of an individual's downfall. It is a rich tapestry depicting how societies function, how they clash, and how they can crumble when their core values are undermined or too inflexible to respond to change. Achebe doesn't romanticize Igbo traditions. He's critical of certain practices, but he also vividly illustrates their depth and significance. Likewise, he doesn't shy away from presenting the destructive arrogance of the colonial project. The novel leaves us with both a lament for what was lost and a nuanced exploration of how communities negotiate identity amid overwhelming upheaval. Okonkwo's final act of suicide stands as a stark symbol. Unable to bend, he snaps under the weight of cultural transformation. The clan, too, stands at a precipice, divided, vulnerable, and uncertain of its own future. In many ways, that future is already being penned by the district commissioner, who sees everything through the lens of pacification. Achebe uses this bleak moment to underscore the importance of storytelling and historical memory. Whose narrative will survive? Whose voice will be heard? The novel's enduring power arises from its insistence on telling the Igbo side of the story, on giving a voice to those who otherwise might be relegated to a footnote in someone else's grand narrative of conquest. Thus ends our journey through Things Fall Apart. We've seen the relentless drumbeat of tradition, the warring hearts of fathers and sons, the unstoppable tide of foreign influence, and the fragility of pride. And perhaps, somewhere in the resonance of Achebe's final lines, we hear a plea for empathy and understanding across all cultures, lest we, too, stand by and watch things fall apart when confronted with the new and the unknown.